Welcome to Mike's on Mike, a conversation about politics, government, and Jacksonville. Join 50-year opinion leaders Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and award-winning broadcaster and longtime political observer, Mike Miller.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mike's on Mike. Nice to have you with us. I'm in the studio. I'm the only Mike in the studio at this point because both Mike Tolbert is back, of course, in the stall, and Hightower decided to volunteer and go work with him. So he's shoveling the same stuff that Tolbert is this week, which is kind of nice. He could use the help. Mike is, not real good with shovels.
We've been shoveling the same stuff for 50 years.
We've just been trading it back and forth for the last 50 years.
You just can't get rid of it. That's the problem. That's the real problem. Anyhow.
Hi, Andrew. How are you doing, Andrew?
We're very excited to have Andrew Pantazzi back with us from the Tributary. And, of course, Mike's on Mike is brought to you by the Jacksonville Historical Society. And we're hoping to get Alan Bliss in here shortly. He wanted to see how the show is taped. But we want to thank him and, of course, all the contributors who make this program possible. So thank you very, very much. This is a return engagement for Andrew. It's good to have you back. Thank you very much.
It's good to be back in the studio with one mic.
Well, at least one. You can't really take all three of us. That would be more than anybody could have to put up with. But we invited Andrew back because one of the issues that we really wanted to talk about is, it's going to be an election that's coming up next year, and that's our state attorney, Melissa Nelson. And Andrew, you have been covering her for a very, very long time. Tell us, first of all, who is Melissa Nelson, and why did you take such an interest in her?
Yeah, I think before even getting into that, maybe explaining what the state attorney is for people. I covered the state attorney's office for close to a decade at the paper under her predecessor, Angela Corey. The state attorney is responsible for criminal prosecutions for state laws in Duval County, Clay County, and Nassau County. It's broken down by judicial circuit, and so that's a very powerful position. It decides who goes to jail, who goes to prison, what plea deals are offered, what laws are prioritized in terms of prosecuting crimes, and how open they are to seeking alternatives to prison. And Melissa Nelson came on the scene. She was a candidate in 2016 in the Republican primary after Angela Corey had been state attorney for 8 years. Angela Corey had gotten national notoriety for being a very tough on crime, very harsh, punitive prosecutor. A lot of death sentences, a lot of life sentences in prison, and some specific cases that went national with their attention, including she prosecuted unsuccessfully George Zimmerman after Trayvon Martin occurred. She prosecuted Michael Dunn locally, who had killed a 17-year-old black teenager who was a Wolfson High School student, Jordan Davis. And she prosecuted a number of other cases. What she was really criticized for locally, among other cases, was one with Christian Fernandez, who was a young child, 11, 12 years old, who was accused of killing his younger brother. And the public defender, who also had his own fair share of scandals and problems in his own past, was initially tasked with defending Christian Fernandez. And after he had so thoroughly, in every which way, bungled the case, so much so that the judge had to put a gag order on him, a group of kind of super lawyers came together to try to represent Christian and to get a more just outcome for him. Angela had been prosecuting Christian as an adult, which was not unusual. She prosecuted a lot of young children, 11, 12, 13, 14, as adults, seeking life sentences in adult prison against them. And this group of lawyers included Melissa Nelson, along with some of the most high-profile criminal defense lawyers, the most high-profile appellate lawyers, all on this team. And Melissa had previously been a prosecutor under the state attorney before Angela. Harry Shorstein, for a good long while, and she had a solid reputation in the office. And so she was recruited by a lot of people to challenge Angela Corey in the Republican primary. And she did so very successfully. There were 3 candidates, and Melissa Nelson, I think, got about 2/3 of the vote in that primary, which is kind of unheard of against an incumbent, not only in a general, but to have that happen in a primary where an incumbent gets, something like 25%. I forget what the vote was, but it was a very low amount of vote that Angela
It was 64-26.
Right?
Yeah.
It was 64-26.
Yeah, so
And,
about only 1 in 4 Republican voters voted for Angela.
Yeah, and looking at that is an anybody but Angela vote, because I don't know how many people in Duval County knew Melissa Nelson at that point. I mean, we've just seen a recent UNF poll where not many people know who she is now after all these years as as a state attorney. Well, that was an anybody but Angela vote. And I read, Andrew, I read somewhere that Angela, that reputation you mentioned, that a magazine asked the question, is she the cruelest prosecutor in America? She had that label. I mean, that was, and it had to be an anybody but Angela vote to get that big of turnout, that many votes.
And I think it's worth talking about later on. Melissa was well known at the time, and she was well known early in her tenure as state attorney. Polling had found she was the most popular. Not long after she was elected, the most popular public official locally. I think it's been more recent, her sudden departure from the public lens that has led to that. But yeah, there was a lot of national attention. A lot of people were ready to move on from the Angela Corey era. There was a lot of personal grievance involved in Angela Corey's election. When she was elected, kind of the heir apparent to Harry Shorstein, who was the longtime Democratic state attorney before her, was Jay Plotkin. He changed parties to run in that election, and a lot of people didn't like that. It was, it's a presidential year election. A lot of people were tying in presidential politics. This is, again, a circuit, so it includes the more conservative exurban counties of Nassau and Clay. And there were a few things. Angela had the police union on her side, who were not super thrilled with Harry Shorstein and the person who he wanted to succeed him. So she had them. She had been fired from the office, and she'd moved to another state attorney's office. And so there was she had a grudge against some of the people who were close to Shorstein, and she was ready to fire people. She was ready to change the administration. And during the election, there were a lot of personal jabs. She did not have any children, for example, and she used to go around criticizing Jay Plotkin for sending his kids to private school, saying, I would never send any of my kids to private school, not mentioning the fact that she didn't have any kids that she could send to any school. And so there were things like that made it a very personally nasty race, and that carried over into the administration, where there were a lot of people in the office, some who stayed, who were afraid of retribution. They were afraid of speaking out. And there were other people who did experience retribution, who did experience what it was like to cross Ms. Corey's, red lines that she put on what she expected. She expected if a gun was involved in a case, 13 months was the minimum she would ever accept. It didn't matter what mitigating factors you had for this kid or what was going on. She expected a state prison sentence. If cocaine was involved, she expected a state prison sentence. And there wasn't nearly as much freedom for line prosecutors, for the people who dealt with the day in, day out cases, to be like, hey, this is a special circumstance. The rule that we've agreed to doesn't really apply here because this kid really has a chance. That really type of freedom did not exist, and it really frustrated defense attorneys who would be talking to the actual prosecutors who are prosecuting, and they had no authority to agree to deals. They had no authority to do those types of things. It was, hey, I'm going to have to go to my supervisor, who's going to have to go to their supervisor, who's going to have to appeal to Angela Corey herself to, give a waiver.
Nelson ran on a reform change ticket. I mean, that was her mantra. How has she changed the office since 2016? What's gone on down there since 2016 that's different before?
Yeah, so the phrase she liked to use during the campaign was smart on crime, as a contrast with tough on crime. The idea of tough on crime being you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and we're going to use the same tool for everyone. Smart on crime being you can still be tough, you can still be punitive, but sometimes you're going to realize there might be alternatives that are more successful at reducing crime. So when it came to, number one, death penalties, she changed the way death penalties were reviewed in the office before they decide to seek death sentences. They still seek a lot of death sentences, the office, but she made it have to go through more of an internal review panel before they decided. She changed the way juvenile cases were handled. They direct filed fewer cases in that first year especially. There was a sharp drop in the number of children who were being prosecuted as adults, changing a lot of that. She agreed to some of the reforms that had been asked for. One of the bigger ones was it's called Keys to Drive, about helping people get their driver's licenses restored, helping people with driving-related offenses with alternatives to incarceration, helping out with mental health court and veterans treatment court and drug court, which existed under Angela Corey but did not have, I think, the same kind of support, where instead under Melissa Nelson she appointed someone to be in charge of the alternatives to incarceration treatment programs for people who maybe are caught in the system. I think early on she had her most reforms because there was kind of the easiest things to do, the things that everybody had broadly agreed on. There were also high-profile cases that were ongoing. There was a particular death sentence that Angela Corey was seeking that the victim's family did not want. They didn't want to go through a death trial. They wanted to have the state accept a plea deal for, I think it was a life sentence or some long sentence, and Angela Corey was still insisting on seeking death. Melissa Nelson accepted a plea deal under her office. So there was more of that, I think, as well, like attention to victims who maybe don't always want the harshest possible sentence, being willing to accept. You might agree to a plea deal that's less than the maximum effort. All that said, I think that was the early years. You know, you had the toughest prosecutor's office in America, potentially. You had one that was out of sync with even very conservative rural areas of Florida. We were much more punitive then. So it was easy to go after some of the low-hanging fruit. I think since then is when it's gotten more difficult, where there's been less public. She's been much less public ever since George Floyd's murder out of Minneapolis. She has not done press conferences. She's not done the same sort of public outreach. She's not as publicly available. It used to be she was everywhere and anywhere. She did this Juvenile Justice Advisory Committee that published a report on how we can do more children's programming and all sorts of wide-ranging policy recommendations. And, you know, there's a big press conference she invited lots of members of the community to be a part of. She's not doing those types of things anymore. She's not out there.
Why do you think that is? Why has she gone underneath the radar?
I think that George Floyd was a big factor during 2020, the protests that were happening, the calls for change and reform, which specifically at that time locally was calls for her office to release body camera footage of police shootings more speedily. At the time, they were very delayed. And she insisted she wanted the sheriff's office to decide. Public records law says if the state attorney's office has those records, it's also up to them. And she did not want to be the one going out ahead of then Sheriff Mike Williams. She did not want to say, we're going to be more aggressive at complying with public records law than the sheriff's office, which is not being very compliant with public records law. And there was a lot of fear of, I think, upsetting the sheriff's office and upsetting police unions.
That was going to be my question, Andrew. Since this change, how have the police rank and file or the sheriff, how are they, smart on crime? How do they feel about her?
I think that early on, the police union, who did not endorse her in 2016,
correct,
did not support her, very strongly supported Angela Corey. I think that they were putting a lot of pressure early on. There were some appointments that they were pushing back on. I think after some years passed, they now are supportive of Melissa Nelson. I've never gotten indications that they're not, or that they're looking for someone to challenge her. But there was one of the earlier stories that I did in her early tenure. She created a human rights division that was tasked with a number of things. It was going to be elder abuse, something else, I forget what it was, and police abuse. It was going to be specifically, hey, we're hiring someone to look at police abuses. You know, there was a police officer who took handcuffed teenagers and just kept punching and beating them in the back of his squad car, so much so that a corrections sergeant who was at the gas station called the police on him, called the police on the police.
On the police officer.
And when you went back in his record, you found that there was incident after incident after incident after incident after incident where he'd beat people up. And almost every time, his wife, who was also an officer, was also there, and they kept dismissing the complaint, saying, oh, well, two officers, were here, so clearly they were in the right. And it called into question a lot of the body cam footage or dash cam footage or different things that came out, security camera footage from those incidents that made it seem really bad. That's the type of thing that this new division was supposed to tackle. She named someone who the police union posted publicly. It was a former prosecutor who had been in criminal defense ever since leaving under Angela Corey. And they claimed that he was racist against the blue, that he was anti-cop, and they protested heavily. They did not end up putting, in my opinion, a very strong focus on prosecuting those police after that. He has done a lot of elder abuse cases. That has been something they have really prioritized that I think was not prioritized under Angela. They've put a special emphasis on that, but they have not put the sort of special emphasis on prosecuting police that you would expect, despite the fact that in the last 8 years, there have been about 100 police employees arrested at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office for all sorts of crimes. There has not been the same sort of vigorous prosecution as I think some people expected.
So how would you...
Andrew, I'm wondering...
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Mike. No, you go. Go ahead.
All right. If Angela Corey was too far towards the strict, how do you characterize Melissa Nelson?
I think that Melissa Nelson is also tough on crime. I think she is... I think that Angela Corey was very willing to be open about who she was. I think that one of the things I did admire about Ms. Corey and the people she had as her top lieutenants in the office is they were fairly straightforward about what they were doing. They believed the death sentence was good pretty much in all murder cases, that they could. They believed in being as harsh as possible. They thought it was a just and worthy cause to prosecute a 12-year-old for, to try to put them away for life in prison. They weren't, I think, shy about that. I think Melissa Nelson is also tough. Not as tough. I wouldn't say she's seeking the same sorts of, in some of these crazier cases that Angela Corey was prosecuting. But I think she casts it more in a moderate language, if that makes sense. I think that sometimes it's the presentation that's changed. Some of it is substantive. It's definitely not what it was 10 years ago. It's definitely not as harsh. But I also don't think she's like one of the progressive prosecutors around the country who are much more willing to say, hey, the whole system needs to be shaken up, that we are putting far too many people in prison and we need to put fewer people in prison. She's done some things that are also particularly tough. One of them is she's prioritized possession of a firearm by a convicted felon cases. Those cases, which often, it's someone who's not accused of violence. It's someone who just has a conviction on their record, which that conviction can be as small as previously one of the biggest things people would get convicted of who had felony convictions and got disenfranchised was driving with a suspended license. If you do that 3 times, you get a felony conviction. And a lot of times it's you get your license suspended, and how are you supposed to drive to work? How are you supposed to pick up your kids? How are you supposed to go to the grocery store? We're not a very public transit or walking friendly city. And those people would keep getting popped, and then they get a felony conviction. And then they also own a firearm like many people do in our community, and then they get popped. Yeah. But from Melissa Nelson's perspective, hey, we need to deal with all this gang violence. We know who these people are. We can't connect them to the actual shootings, so we're going to try to connect them with these possession of a firearm charges. And she's used YouTube videos, rap music videos to say, hey, in this video it looks like they're carrying a firearm. She's been willing to use laws and I think sometimes stretch them in creative ways to be particularly harsh or punitive in the ways that she thinks is smarter and is more likely to reduce crime. But I don't think that she's soft in any way. I don't think she's...
Well, let me ask you this, Andrew.
I think you're going to hear differently from Mr. Tolbert here in a moment.
maybe in a different area.
Right.
When you were here with us last time, mm-hmm. My memory is that you said that she has not called a grand jury in a civil matter, and we've had situation after situation after situation. When Matt Shirt ran into his issues, she asked the governor to recuse him. When you guys discovered that Mike Williams moved to Nassau County, nothing happened with that. And you can't tell me, for instance, that in the courthouse and in the sheriff's department and in the state attorney's office, they didn't know his ass was gone. They had to know. It's too cliquish over there. We've been talking about the city council members who run CEOs of nonprofits who are giving themselves money. Where is she gone when it comes to potential public corruption?
And not to forget JEA either, which is a very
in the JEA.
Yeah, I mean, she totally. Yeah, I used the word punt. Mike used the word fumbled. Either way, she fumbled on the punt. I mean, that to me was the biggest disappointment.
When it comes to public corruption, she has been very soft. She has been very unwilling to prosecute, to call grand juries. So I think the other context to know is to know Harry Shorstein as state attorney, who initially hired her, 25 years ago or however long it's been at this point. Harry Shorstein, who'd been the state attorney, called grand juries all the time over the courthouse being built, over sunshine violations, government being done in secret, public records issues. He would call grand juries. And they wouldn't indict. They weren't even for necessarily, hey, here's an indictment coming out, but they would come out with a presentment, a big, thick report that said, here's all the ways that city government is violating the law, breaking the law, and they need to fix this, which helped lead to our ethics code, helped lead to a lot of reforms that we've seen in city government. Angela Corey did not use those grand juries, and Melissa Nelson has also not used those same grand juries. She's been very unwilling to.
Why? Why do you think that's the case, though?
I've asked her before, and she said she doesn't see that as the priority of the office. That
And whose office should it be a priority to, if not?
Yeah, I keep making the point, Andrew, that the state attorney is the watchdog, and I get the impression that she's acting more like a lapdog when it comes to public corruption. Most of the people who run in the city and on the city council, and Mike Williams and all these other people are fellow Republicans. I don't know if she's afraid to go after her friends or if she closes her eyes. Hightower and I go back to Ed Austin and Harry, but Ed Austin. Ed, and I've said this before, Ed indicted his best friend, Mayor Tansler. Indicted, called a grand jury, had him indicted. He had it called a grand jury on Jake Godbold, Mayor Godbold, another great friend of his. It didn't matter. But this seems to me like if you're my cousin, I'm going to close my eyes and walk away.
So I think it's even worse than just the lack of calling grand juries. So when new city council members get elected, they do an orientation. And at the orientation this past summer, the first assistant state attorney, one of her top the top people in the administration under Melissa, Steve Siegel, taught them. He was supposed to be teaching about sunshine law and public records law. And what he said was that in Jacksonville, there was not the same type of corruption in procurement that you see in Los Angeles and other major cities. That he was saying that in Jacksonville, everything is going well. He's saying this at the same time that there's a federal prosecution currently ongoing at JEA. He said specifically that what we see in other major cities, like Los Angeles, we don't see here, where there's corruption in procurement. And so he was saying, don't worry to city council. We don't think anything you're doing is wrong. Everything's going fine. We have a really good, city government. Everything is fine here. And that's one of the top people in her office telling the people who are in fact saying, we're going to do $1 million emergency grant for my nonprofit because my nonprofit needs it, and there's no other nonprofit that could possibly bid for this work through a bidding process. So we're going to just give it directly to me so that I can run it. And that's not seen as corrupt. That's not seen as needing to be evaluated. Whereas back in the day, again, to go back to Shorstein or other predecessors, even if it's not a violation of criminal law, or if it is, but it doesn't rise to the level of deserving prison time, which sometimes there's people who violate the law where it doesn't deserve prison time. That's fine. You still can call a grand jury that says we need stronger laws or we need stronger deterrents other than prison, things that are stopping these types of bid rigging or no bidding.
It's breaking the public trust.
Yeah.
It's breaking the public trust.
But it
might not be
shows that
breaking a law.
their office doesn't think
It might
that
not
there
be
is
breaking a
any.
law, but it's breaking the trust.
And
Well, I mean, if he said that to the new city council that came in shortly in
July
1,
July.
well, to Mike Tolbert, who last week brought up the issue, you had two city council. You had the chairman of the finance and the other one at the last minute. At midnight they slip in. They give themselves, instead of they set a new procedure, they go around the procedure and give themselves money for their own nonprofits.
There were
What's
actually,
the matter with
there were
it?
actually
They-
there were actually three of them, if I'm not mistaken. It was
Yeah.
Diamond.
So
it was,
when you've got the state attorney saying everything's fine and we don't have to worry about it, well, you give them a free pass.
And not only that, to make matters even worse, he then gave them advice on public records law, where he said that text messages to one another about whether or not you're going to attend a meeting is transitory, and that's not a public record, which is ridiculous because if you're texting someone about whether you're going to make a vote or not, that's a pretty substantive, significant thing. If you're making sure someone's not going to be at a meeting or making sure they will be there so that your vote will pass, that's pretty substantive. And he was telling them he didn't think that was a public record.
how much of that, though, would be under the purview of the state attorney, and how much of that would be under the ethics officer? Because since Carla Miller has left, I can't even tell you who the ethics officer is. I'm embarrassed to say it. I don't know who is under the current administration, but Carla, as I recall, was pretty strong, and she was quick to give an opinion after looking into it, obviously, but she'd look into it and then give her opinion. I'm not seeing that here. And even if some of those issues that we're talking about don't rise to the level of a grand jury or an indictment or anything like that, it still calls for some kind of a comment from the ethics officer. When you have 3 city council members who are getting no bid appropriations just because they happen to be ahead of that nonprofit, there's something that's fishy about that.
And I think it's
More
also...
than 3.
Go ahead, Mike.
It's more than 3.
Yeah.
It's more than 3 members.
Is it?
Yeah, it is. I think there's still the role for the state attorney who has subpoena power to be able to draw out more records than we can get through our public records requests, because I don't think we're always getting complete records when we make these requests with what's being fulfilled, to investigate and to shine a light on this. That was a big part of what Shorstein did. And I'll also say one of the things that I always deeply admired about Mayor Payton at the time that Shorstein was doing grand juries investigating Mayor Payton. Mayor Payton's going over to Shorstein and saying, come be part of Jack's journey. And he's, I don't think that they were the best of friends when it came to the fact that Shorstein was making his life pretty difficult, but he was still willing to say, we're going to be partners in trying to fight crime. We're going to be partners in trying to reduce crime. And you can hold accountable other parts of government and still be able to partner with them on the things that matter, the things like reducing crime. It's not a either or. I think sometimes it is seen as either or. Hey, I don't want to upset. I'm more focused on, the sort of violent crime that I'm going to, put all my attention on. And if I focus on public corruption, all these people aren't going to be willing to appropriate anymore to the nonprofits I think are doing good work, or they're not going to work with me on coordinating. And I just don't think that's true. I think, hopefully we've got some grown-ups in government who can accept just because you're investigating me on something else does not mean I'm going to shut you out of the process and the system when it comes to keeping our city safe.
I don't think.
How do you think?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I just.
I was just.
Now I understand. I understand why the city council. Go back when you said about the text. No wonder, for a lot of different reasons, and I'm a little bit partial on this one. Now I understand why some of the council members, when Randy DeFore was up and there was no communications, yet you had members saying, I'm not gonna meet with her, or things were going on that obviously they were communicating with each other, and yet it went by the wayside. With all due respect to Mike Tolbert, I'm not sure she's a lapdog. There's no dog there, and there's no dog at all in this situation. And I get that she's, 11-year-old doesn't know, go to prison for life. I get all that, but when you kind of go back to the cynicism of government and the reason why the day-to-day government is working or not working, or that the taxpayer thinks that they're getting screwed over, it's because that nobody is calling into question when people are sitting there violating basic ethics. And I have to just tell you, go back, and this is something that Mike Tolbert and I have talked about. You may not have always agreed with Shorstein, you may not have always agreed with Ed Austin, but damn it, they knew why they were going to do it. People walked the line because they weren't sure how that Ed or Harry were going to call them on it. Nobody's calling him on it because she doesn't think it's important.
One of the other things that Harry did near the end of his tenure,
I think to me, that she's violating what her office is all about.
Near the end of Shorstein's tenure, one of the grand jury investigations he had was into, I think it was Brevard or Volusia, one of the jails outside of the circuit that he'd been called in because the state attorney recused. But he did a grand jury that was investigating the conditions in the jail. Because it was becoming really problematic, the deaths happening there. That's another area where we're seeing people who are in the jail who are dying at record high rates. The state attorney should be involved in that. The state attorney should care about the people who they're prosecuting, whether they're being kept safe. And the state attorney should be part of the process saying, look, let's use subpoena records to find out what's going on with the medical care, what's going on with the corrections officers, what's going on with the facilities. Let's have a grand jury put together a report that says, what do we need to do? And we haven't seen that. We haven't seen that kind of leadership when it comes to saying these are issues of extreme public importance and we need to be out front on this in the same way that we did under prior state attorneys.
Including, by the way, the no-bid contract that went to NAFCARE after they kicked Armour out. And there was no competition with that as well. And as you pointed out in the tributary, NAFCARE came with their own baggage. And they still have an awful lot of baggage. And nevertheless, it was just given to them based on, I believe, if I remember your article correctly, a recommendation from Hillsborough County.
Yeah, that's right. And there's so much going on in procurement. It really, sometimes I read the grand jury report that came out against Mayor Payton's procurement with an old aide who had an IT company, and I laugh because I'm like, it was a single no bid contract led to a grand jury investigation, and now no bid contracts are left and right. They're just part of city government. They're accepted again, the medical care one. Now it's $100 million contracts that we're just going to no bid out, all the way down to small contracts. Mayor Deegan doing the small no bid contract on the grant writing. Mm-hmm. We have accepted.
But wait a minute now. Their research showed that was the only firm in America that could do that.
The only firm in America.
Let's be fair.
Grant writing and lobbying.
Yeah. Let's be fair. That was. Like I said, I got swampland for you.
The culture around procurement at City Hall has really reached a depressing level, and it's affecting the effectiveness of government. I mean, we have, thankfully, post-recession, property values have risen. We finally are getting tax revenue coming into city government so that we can finally, hopefully, start offering city services that have been lacking in this city for decades. But I feel like we're being hampered and held back by this corrupt procurement process where we just accept no bid contracts left and right. And even the few, the little procurement that isn't no bid, people don't believe in the process so that they're not bidding for it. Or the process is being rigged so that it's going to go to a certain company. You're writing the bid in such a way to make sure only one company can get it. And I think that's really hampering the ability of city government to be effective on every element, from roads to parks to every part of government. Lobbying. I mean, I think we're not getting as effective a government as possible, and the state attorney could step in and say, we're going to investigate what's been happening at procurement and come out with recommendations, even if they're not criminal indictments.
I'm interested to see how that's going to play out as we move forward with building the stadium of the future, because there are going to be an awful lot of contracts that have to be let for that. And there are a lot of pre-qualifications that have to be met before you're even allowed to bid on that.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that you guys will be following that real closely and list those that may not be done the way they should be done.
Absolutely.
Getting close to the time here,
Mike
guys.
Miller?
What else you got? Yes.
Well, I was going to ask you to ask Andrew about the latest promotion he's got going on.
Thank you.
that
I was
we
going
talked
to wrap
about.
up
Yeah.
our half hour with this. Andrew's paper came out with an announcement of a super match program that they're doing. And you have to realize, and I hope the audience does, the Tributary is a nonprofit organization here, folks. In fact, unfortunately, they're nonprofit for a while. We're trying to make them profitable so they won't fold. But anyhow, if you will explain to this, the match program that you guys have going.
Yeah, so we've got some national funders, and we've got the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund locally that's willing to match donations we receive, especially in November. And then we've got some who will match some in December, but even more in November for any digital donations we get from our website. And so they'll be triple match. So you give $20 and then we get $80 because we get $60 from the matching funds that we have, and we get the 20 from you. And for new monthly donors, we get the national donors will actually match the full year's value. So if you're a $20 a month new donor, they're going to match that 20 times 12. And so that's really helpful for us. And this is truly, sometimes I think you hear matching programs and you're like, well, you're probably getting the money anyway. They're doing this for a bunch of news organizations, and it's just however much we can get, we're going to be able to get matched. And so we have an opportunity now for locals to donate and really help us. A lot of our funds that we get come in these final 2 months with this end of year campaign. And this is what allows us to do the work year round. And so please, jackstrib.org, we have a donate page on there. If you donate now, it's going to be even more impactful than a donation any other time of year.
Okay, we'll have that address up on the screen as well as
Thank
this
you.
goes out too. So we want to make sure.
Yeah, good luck on this. And Andrew, thanks for coming back, and
Thank
thanks
you.
for the way that you've better understanding of what went on.
Great voice. What are you working on?
Really.
We've got some procurement stories we're working on, and
Isn't that ironic?
and we've got some others. So we're trying to continue to stay on the jail, and so we've got some more follow-ups and continue.
UF Health, please. UF Health Shands, give the medical treatment to them and make it.
It's a teaching hospital, for goodness sake.
Well, it's great education.
That's right.
Let's put it that
Yeah,
way.
very-
We already fund them, don't we, to a great extent. So it wouldn't be out of the ordinary to just tack this onto there, particularly since they're local and we know them.
Yeah.
That's been my mantra ever since you broke the story, is give it to UF Health. Anyhow.
We appreciate you being there. And
Thank you, Andrew,
keep us
so
posted
much.
and come back.
All right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Have a good
take
Thanksgiving, and
care.
we will have them back soon. Once again, thank you all for joining us. Please tell your friends about us and catch us on Facebook, on our website at mikesoundmike.com. You can get us on Spotify. You can get us on Apple iPods, and just about any other place where you catch your podcasts. Once again, our thanks to the Jacksonville Historical Society for their sponsorship of this program, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Andrew, good to see you. Thanks again.
Good to see you.
Mike's on Mike with Mike Hightower, Mike Tolbert, and Mike Miller can be found at your favorite podcasting platform, Facebook and YouTube. Learn more at mikesonmike.com. Join us next time for more conversations with Mike's on Mike.